Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. And for today's case, we have an infamous one, a 8-1 Supreme Court decision that still remains good law because it's never been expressly overturned and deals with some pretty controversial things, to put it mildly. So this is by request of someone on the channel. This is Buck versus Bell, 1927, written by Justice Holmes. In this case, the United States Supreme Court, by an 8-1 vote, said it's constitutional for the state of Virginia to forcibly sterilize someone against their will. So we're going to read this. Still good law case because it's never been overturned. 8-1 Supreme Court decision about why it's okay to forcibly sterilize people. This is a writ of error to review a judgment of the Supreme Court of the Appeals of the State of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, affirming the judgment of the sister circuit court, which is a lower court in Virginia. So circuit court here is a trial court, but they have different names in Virginia for different kinds of courts. So circuit court is a kind of trial court in Virginia. So affirming the judgment of the trial court of Amherst County, by which the defendant, in error, the superintendent of the state colony for epileptics and feeble-minded. So the superintendent of this place was ordered to perform the option of whatever, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that, upon Carrie Buck, the plaintiff in error, for the purpose of making her sterile. Okay, great. Yeah, so we have a person who has been committed to a state institution, insane asylum, which has a fantastic, just great name here. And the superintendent has been ordered and directed to forcibly sterilize this woman against her will. And the trial court said, this seems fine to us. And so then the Supreme Court is being asked, hey, is this a cool thing? Can we do that? Can we forcibly sterilize this woman who is under state custody because she's in an insane asylum, which they didn't call it an insane asylum. Reminder, they called it the State Colony for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded because that was the official name of the thing. So can we forcibly sterilize this woman? Good times. Let's read on. Carrie Buck is a feeble-minded white woman who is committed to the state colony above mentioned in due form. She is the daughter of a feeble-minded mother in the same institution and the mother of an illegitimate feeble-minded child. She was 18 years old at the time of the trial of her case in the circuit court. Reminder, trial court, because that's one of the things that they call the trial court in Virginia is a circuit court. So in the later part of 1924, an act of Virginia in 1924, so the legislature, here's what they had to opine, recites that the health of a patient and the welfare of the society may be promoted in certain cases by sterilization of mental defectives under careful state guard. Virginia thought this was a good idea. They passed legislation and said this is a good thing. Sterilization may be effected in males by vasectomy and females by whatever, without serious pain or substantial danger to life. The Commonwealth of Virginia is supported in various institutions. Many defective persons who have now discharged would become a menace, but if incapable of procreating, might be discharged with safety and become self-supporting with them benefits themselves in society, and become self-supporting with benefits to themselves. And the experience has shown that heredity plays an important part in the transmission of insanity and imbecility, which apparently is a word. Imbecility. Being an imbecile, which is apparently a thing you can be legally declared in 1924. Yeah, intelligence and insanity may spread genetically. That's probably true. Yeah. So if we forcibly sterilize people, that would prevent that from happening. This is team eugenics is a good idea. The state then enacts whatever the superintendent of certain institutions, including the above state colony, shall be of the opinion is for the best interest of the patient and of society that the inmate under care should be sterilized. He may have the operation performed upon any patient afflicted with these hereditary forms of insanity, imbecility, which is a legal term, or complying with very careful provisions which the Act protects patients from possible abuse. I'm not sure how careful the very careful provisions are. This is like, well, we have really careful provisions here, guys. We're really being really careful about it. We think we should forcibly sterilize this woman against her will, but we're being really careful. What do you have to say about all this, Supreme Court? Let's read on. The attack here, which is to say this lawsuit, the justification for this. So this lawsuit is not for the procedural mechanism of it. So we're not saying, hey, we got bad process. We got bad evaluation. but rather upon the substance. So we're challenging this substantively, not procedurally. So we're not saying the state didn't give us the proper procedure. We're saying that this is bad substantively. This infringes a fundamental right. It seems contended that under no circumstances could such an order be justified. That's the argument. It seems to be contended, these people appear to be arguing that in no circumstances could this be justified. You're correct, Supreme Court. You have divined the correct argument. This is the argument. It is being contended that under no circumstances could it be justified. That is the argument. All right, so you've correctly deduced the argument. It certainly is contended the order cannot be justified upon the existing grounds. The judgment finds facts that have been recited, and that Carrie Buck is the probable potential patient of socially inadequate offspring. Likewise afflicted, she may be sterilized without detriment to her general health, and that her welfare and that of society will be promoted by this. And thereupon we make the order. In view of the general declarations of the legislature and specific findings of this court, obviously, we cannot say as a matter of law that the grounds do not exist. And if they do exist, it justifies the result. So the court below didn't make a clear error. We think those grounds exist, and if they exist, we have no problem with any of this. Seems fine to us. We have seen more than once the public welfare may be called upon for the best citizens for their lives. So in the name of the public good, we can infringe on a person's autonomy to the point that we can forcibly sterilize them in the name of the good of the order. It would be strange. It would apparently be strange. It would be strange if it could not call upon those who already sap the strength of the state for these lesser sacrifices, such as being sterilized being a lesser sacrifice, often not felt to be such by those concerned, in order to prevent our being swamped with incompetence. Justice Holmes, writing on behalf of an 8-1 Supreme Court, says a couple things. Well, the needs of the many sometimes outweigh the needs of the few. Okay, I guess. And when the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, we can impose upon the few. Okay. And we can impose upon them to the point of sterilization because that's a lesser sacrifice. You're right in the individual autonomy is not that important. It's a lesser sacrifice. What is your objection? The needs of the many, the needs of the order can impose to you to the point, yeah, okay, let's press on. It is better for all the world. Great. If instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, we've gone full bore Minority Report guys here. So Justice Holmes, just in case you missed it somehow, is saying, hey, we would just have to wind up executing these people anyway because they'd commit crimes and they'd wind up with a death penalty. So we just wind up having to execute them anyway and giving them death penalty because of the crimes they'll commit. So why not save ourselves the trouble and just prevent them from being born? All right, Justice Holmes, you rock on. It would be better for all the world instead of waiting to execute the degenerate offspring for their crime or allowing them to starve because they're imbeciles, which again is a legal term. I'm laughing because the horror show, in case that isn't clear. Wow, I'm laughing because the horror show. I'm using laughter to relieve the tension because wow. So instead of executing them because they commit crimes or allowing them to starve, it would be better if society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. Certain kinds of people literally do not deserve to breed, says an 8-1 Supreme Court written by the late and truly great, and he is great. He's one of the better justices we've ever had, and I do mean that unironically. He wrote some really great stuff, but he apparently also thought eugenics was a super great plan. All right, so let's just prevent that kind from breeding. And then he writes this wonderful line here at the end, just making us question all the things we ever believed in. The principles that allow for compulsory vaccination. You guys remember that case, right? The principles that allow us to forcibly vaccinate people is broad enough to cover cutting of the fallopian tubes. So remember how recently we covered that district court case from Pennsylvania, And I said in that stream that Jacobson was one of the weaker points of that analysis because Jacobson is still good law. And if you thought Jacobson applied, the district court would go the other way. And then I said, well, I don't think Jacobson applies, and here's a whole bunch of reasons I don't think it applies. Well, Justice Holmes says, well, if you take Jacobson as a given and we can forcibly vaccinate people, why not forcibly sterilize them? Why not both? It's just a natural extension of that. So if you didn't have enough reason to think that Jacobson maybe isn't the greatest decision ever, if you didn't have enough reason to think Jacobson was the greatest decision ever, here's another reason to think Jacobson is not the greatest decision ever. There's another reason to think Jacobson is not the greatest decision ever is that if you think it's good law, then Buck versus Bell is a logical consequence of it. So maybe it's not a great decision after all. He finishes by saying, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. On behalf of an 8-1 Supreme Court saying, hey, mandatory vaccinations and vaccinations against your will seem super great. So since that's super great, why not forcible sterilization? How about that? Says an 8-1 Supreme Court. Great. Super. Wow. All right, let's end this thing. So that brings us to the end of the case of Buck versus Bell, which still technically remains good law because it's never been overruled. So this is still valid law. Yeah. That brings us to the end of the coverage of Buck versus Bell, an 8-1 Supreme Court decision. The time that the Supreme Court said eugenics seems like a good idea, and certain kinds of people should not be allowed to breed, and we just have to wind up executing them anyway or they'd starve to death. So why not sterilize their parents? And 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. I don't know what more to say about it. That's Buck versus Bell for you. Justice Holmes, who, thought sterilization was a super duper good idea and somehow it remains good law and relies on Jacobson, which said that compelled vaccinations are okay. So I guess we can question all the things at this point because that brings us to the end of the coverage of this case. Thank you so much for being part of the Uncivil Law family. If you liked this latest video, please give it a like below and hit the join button. For 99 cents a month, you too can give a recurring membership that helps this channel grow and helps YouTube to recommend this channel to others. We really appreciate your continued financial support and all your love. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.